All right. I'm James Orr. We are going to be doing buying process overview tonight. Hello. Upcoming classes. While people are straggling in a couple minutes late, I will get started. So the upcoming classes next Tuesday. How many people watched the webinar last night, the recording I posted up on Young Nomad stuff? Anyone? Wow, that's crazy. So next Tuesday, though, is how to acquire a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio with just $3,000. That will be on Tuesday night. That's the webinar. If you need to have access to that, go ahead and email me. I'll send you a direct link, or I'll send it out on the Meetup site. But if you guys remember presentations I've done, that was the one where I discovered it when we were coming up with how to minimize down payment for doing Nomad. And then I wrote the whole book on that. That was the book I gave out for Christmas last year. And this is the book that I'm going to be giving out for Christmas this year. This is the draft of it. It's like 400 pages long. It's crazy. So that will be at the Christmas party, provided I get it done before now and then, which I should. I've only got like 12 more pages to write. So this is going to be the class coming up next Tuesday, how to acquire a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio with just $3,000. And then there is not a class the following Tuesday. That happens to be All Saints Day. It's also St. Wolfgang's Day, if you're kind of following that. What are you shaking your head at me for? That's true. This is all true stuff. But what's that? What's that?
Wolfgang?
Yeah, it's St. Wolfgang. Actually, that is my confirmation name.
Ah, okay.
And so I happen to know the All Saints Day happens to be Halloween for St. Wolfgang. Yep. People don't believe me, but it's absolutely true. The bishop, when he was there doing his dealio, he's like, Wolfgang, is that even a saint? It is a saint. It is a saint. So next Wednesday, though, is Finding Amazing Real Estate Deals. That's going to be me. Are you wanting to teach any classes anytime soon?
I just taught like 50 in a row.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, how many do I have to teach?
I don't know. I don't know.
I was talking to Brendan about this on the way out. The cash-on-cash return on investment, is that yours or mine?
It actually happens to be mine, but you're welcome to teach it if you want.
No, what's next?
I don't have the schedule done next. That's why I put the holiday in, because I didn't know what was coming after that. So, yeah. All right, so that's going to be then next Wednesday, a week from today, is Finding Amazing Deals. And then the Wednesday after that, November 1st, is going to be Analyzing Deals, Cash-on-Cash Return on Investment. Brian may be teaching that. He just may not know it. But right now, I'm scheduled to teach it. It is a slightly different presentation than what he usually teaches for deal analysis, because it goes into a bunch of detail on that. Any questions on upcoming classes? Sweet. Everyone's like in the back rows. Like there's no one sitting in the front row at all. My glasses can actually work. So what we're going to do is we're going to do introductions. Who are you and what's your excuse for not doing your first deal? And then an important note for Daniel, who's not here tonight. Please do not take photos of slides or record audio or video of incorrect presentations. The recordings are available for clients. I'm going to talk to Tammy about whether or not we're going to change this policy. We're going to talk about it in the future. But we might change it up a little bit, make certain ones available and certain ones not available. So who are you and what's your excuse for not doing your first deal? Adam, you're up first, buddy. What's your excuse for not doing your first deal?
I've done my first deal.
Oh, okay. What's your excuse for not doing your next deal?
No excuse.
No excuse. Okay, that's fair. Awesome. Cool. Welcome. Hello.
Hi, I'm Carolyn. Adam and I are husband-wife investors together.
Okay.
So I guess I don't have an excuse because we're working on our next deal.
That's awesome. Very cool. Welcome. Thanks. Hello.
Well, my name's Mary Madney, and I'm looking to do my first deal.
So what's your excuse? What's preventing you from doing it?
Finding a deal.
Finding the deal. Okay, that's fair. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, I'm Brandon. I've already done a deal, but it is just my house that I live in currently, so probably the only excuse I would have to not do the next one would just be not fully understanding what being a landlord and renting that house and what all that is.
Okay, we've got classes on that, so we'll figure all that out. Joe.
I'm Joe. My excuse for not doing my next deal is we're right in the middle of doing the current deal, so it's free time.
But isn't that the deal? Isn't that your next deal? You're sort of in the middle of it?
We're right in the middle of our next deal, yeah. So after that, I can't say that I would have a good excuse for not doing the other one.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. Curtis.
I'm Curtis. I guess my excuse is finding a deal that I think I can succeed in.
Okay. Like succeed in what way? Like cash flow wise?
Well, cash flow, being able to find something that I can finance,
Okay, cool, awesome, welcome. Hello. What is preventing you from doing your next deal, and who are you?
Brian Williams. I don't have any excuses. I'm always looking.
I don't have any excuses at all for anything. There's no excuses. All right.
My first share of deals.
Second deal. You've done your third deal. All right, cool. Welcome. Hello.
Hi, I'm Brad, and I don't do deals, so leave it up to him.
Nice. That's a good.
I really like your glasses, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I could actually see you now. I never knew what you looked like before. Awesome. Welcome. Hello.
So Brendan wants to know what the deal is with your glasses.
Yes, I was wondering if you wore contacts or if this is just,
No, I had LASIK back in like 2003, and at the time when I got LASIK, I had like 2015 vision, and I've been complaining to Brian for several years now that I can't see my golf ball, and so I've been trying to tell him I don't think I have 2015. So I went to what?
Are you gonna beat me this week?
No, I'm not a chance. So I went to an eye exam. It must have been a year ago almost. I went to get an eye exam a year ago. And the guy said, you have 20/20, but I knew that it was blurry. He said, but your prescription is so small, it doesn't really make a difference. Why? Don't bother getting one. And so I persuaded myself that I didn't need it. But over the last year, I've been complaining to Tammy every time I look over at something. I'm like, I could read it, but it's blurry. Like I had 20/20, but it was still blurry. But now I have like very clear 20/20. Apparently, it's like 2015 or 2010 or something. So. Yeah, it's a mess with Brian. And I'm going to go play golf. I'll just be like, I still can't see my ball. I have no idea what's going on. Awesome. So who are you? What's your excuse for not doing your first deal or your next deal?
Brendan Foster, buy and hold investor in Northern Colorado. I've done my first deal, so my current deal, my excuse is that the sellers have been dragging their feet since February.
That is a valid excuse, actually. Yes, that is actually a really true excuse for you. Thank you. Welcome. Hello. Who are you?
I'm Tammy, and we're working on a deal right now. And I did verify, in case anyone was wondering, that the feast day for St. Wolfgang is October 31st.
There you go.
And the picture, if you look it up, there's a picture, he was a bishop, I guess, of him with a scroll as a bishop, and this really creepy-looking tall demon with wings. It's weird. I have to read the story later.
Huh. I thought he was like with animals. He was sort of like a guy. Yeah. I don't know about demons. We're going to mix it up. Allison, who are you and what's preventing you from doing your first deal?
Hi, I'm Allison, and I guess the biggest thing preventing me from doing my first deal is that I'm a broke college student.
Ah, the broke college student excuse. I've heard of that one before. Awesome. Thanks. Welcome. Hello.
Hello, my name is Scott, and right now our main excuse is we're very fresh at this. We're just still getting information on the whole process and everything involved.
Okay.
And most of the down payment.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, we have a whole class on down payment, so we could solve that for you. You came last week to the financing class, right? So you guys got these handouts? And you got it too already, right? All right, good. Awesome, thank you, welcome. Are we trying to skip you? Is that what you're trying to do? Oh, okay. Because some people are like, there are significant others like, oh, just what he said, skip me. I'm like, I'm introverted and shy. That's like me. Oh, okay. So coming from this angle is easier. Awesome.
I'm Steph. Yeah, just trying to be educated in the whole process before, so it just doesn't seem stressful, and just working on what the most intelligent buyers in this market, just because it's so competitive, I want to be successful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. Hello.
Hi, I'm Lashana. My excuse is that I need to send all the documents to my lender, and it's a lot of documents.
Yeah.
And my arm and leg and firstborn child.
Yeah, they do want a lot of stuff. That is true. All right, awesome. Well, thanks. Welcome, everybody. That's the introduction. So we're going to do buying process overview tonight. So there's going to be a lot of detail for tonight. You'll see the handout, just kind of like some visuals to kind of give you an idea of where we're coming from. But this is intended to be an overview. There are certain boxes here that are their own 2-hour class. And so I can't teach, for example, there's one box coming up that's on financing. Last week we did a whole 2-hour class just on financing alone. So this is going to be an overview of some of the steps. Some of the things are too small to teach and other things, so I'll cover those tonight. But there are some boxes here where we're going to go into a lot of detail. So this is the big picture overview of what is typically considered the buying process here in our local marketplace. So normally you're going to have your first meeting with your real estate agent. You're going to sit down and go over a bunch of stuff. We're going to go into detail with that tonight. Then there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen once you meet with your real estate agent before you actually go start looking at houses. So that's the pre-showings section here. We'll cover a bunch of that stuff tonight. And then there's a whole section on showings. What do you do when you're out looking at properties? You know, how do you avoid sellers from recording your secret conversations when you're in looking at their properties or recording you a video, which some of them are doing. And so there's some stuff in there about showings. And then there's the whole process of what do you need in order to write an offer? Going over the contract and understanding that. And that's a separate class, which we'll go over a little bit of tonight, but it's 2 hours by itself. Then what happens from once you have a contract accepted until you get to closing? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens when you're under contract, and we take about 2 hours and we go over that in another class, but there's a ton of detail there as well. And then what happens actually at closing? The closing of the financing portion of the transaction and the closing of the real estate portion of the transaction, that's a whole separate class as well. And then what are some of the things that your real estate broker and you should be doing after closing, the post-closing relationship? And so we'll cover just a tiny bit of that tonight as well. So normally when we go through these, I highlight the one that we're about to cover in blue. So if you're ever looking at the video and you're wondering where you are as you scan through, the blue one is the one we're about to cover. I used to do green and blue, but tonight we're just doing blue. All right, so the first meeting, I'm going to tell you what it's like to meet with me for the first time, real estate broker here in Colorado, and I'm going to go over what the process is for me, and then realize that if you go meet with another broker, they may do things slightly differently, and so you may want to see the difference between those, but I figured I'll share with you what I've got going on. So one of the first things I do when I meet with somebody is I ask them how much detail they want. Because I could go to Freaky Town on just one of the documents and spend an hour explaining to them, you know, definitions of working relationships. Or I could really gloss over all the paperwork because they're like, I don't care about any of that. Tell me about deal analysis, because that's really my big concern. So part of it is finding out what their main issues are and how much detail they want. So one of the things we do in order to save ourselves the time of spending 4 hours on the first meeting together is I usually give clients a copy of this book. And what this book is, it's basically all of your checklists that you got in front of you, except it's got additional checkpoints for each one of the diagrams to show you what steps are involved in those. And so this saves me from having to teach every single step along the way. We just give them a copy of this book for clients. And then this is going to be added. So this is what we're talking about here, the Ultimate Nomad Checklist. So this is the new book that I'm writing. I started writing this over the summer when we talked about the goal setting class and sitting down with your goals and writing out why it's important to write down every step in the buying process so that you know what's coming up. So this is the book I'm going to be giving out at the Christmas party this year, provided I get it written in time, which it's like 99% done, so I'll probably get it written in time. So if you come to the Christmas party this year, you will get a copy of this book. Clients will start getting copies of it when we sit down together. And also, I wrote it in such a way that it's all digital so that when you go on the website, you can click off things as you do them and keep track of things. So normally when you meet, you'll get a copy of Northern Colorado Real Estate Advisor book, which is this. You'll also get a copy of the Nomad book, which all of you should have gotten if you handed in one of those sheets. So once you hand in those sheets to Allison over here, she'll give you copies of this. So if you haven't gotten one when we get together, you'll do that. And then there'll be the new Nomad book. I will tell you, most real estate agents are not giving you books. They're usually giving you a form that says, here, please sign this. It means that you're my client. You owe me a commission. And we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail. It's called the exclusive right to buy listing contract. But they're not going to sit down and give you information like this. So that's pretty untypical for them. There's also another book that I gave away for Christmas last year at the Christmas party. How many people got the 3K Nomad book? Okay, so if you didn't come to the Christmas party, you got it too. If you didn't come to the Christmas party last year, you probably didn't copy this. I have those. Instead of giving out physical copies now, it's much more interactive if you read it on the web. And so if you go to the Learn to Be Rich website and you read it online, you'll actually be able to access it there. So if you go to learntoberichcom/book, it actually has a copy of the book instead of actually doing the printout. All right, so at the meeting, you'll receive copies of the books. We're going to go over a lot of detail. And then you'll receive most of these following documents, usually via DocuSign. So I'm not going to give you copies of them in person because you need to sign them, but I'm happy to go over them with you if you want to. And so these are the documents that we're going to do, and I'll kind of go over what they are here quickly. So definition of working relationship, I'm going to have a whole bunch of detail on this in a second, but that describes that real estate brokers can work with people in 4 different ways. They can represent the seller, they can represent the buyer, they can act like a referee, not representing either party, but just helping a buyer and seller actually complete a transaction. They're not really looking out for the best interests of either party. They're just sort of playing neutral. And then finally, you can act like a customer. So if a real estate broker is representing a seller and they're not representing you, then you are the customer. Okay? And it works the other way too. So that's what definition of working relationship is all about. Exclusive right to buy is the agreement that says you are working with a real estate broker. It has your obligations and the real estate broker's obligations to you. And then professional services provided. You've got part of that on your handout tonight. There's like 2 columns of bulleted lists. That's basically the highly abridged version of that, and we're going to cover that tonight as to who does what in the real estate transaction. You guys see that bulleted list somewhere? Okay, good. And then the last one is we started adding this, I don't know, a year ago or so, Tam, that we added the new construction stuff. So a lot of my clients, especially a lot of investor clients, they prefer to buy new construction. And there are some additional risks and things you need to know when you buy a new construction property. And so we have like this, I don't know, 4 or 5 page document that the attorney prepared that goes over the additional risks of buying new construction properties. And so that covers some of those things, and it's sort of like a discussion point. If you're thinking about new construction, we can go over it together and talk about the differences and how that works. So that's pretty much the meeting here. Let's go into detail now. So let's talk about, this is the first meeting with the real estate broker. So these are the steps that I normally cover. Number 1 is we usually go over paperwork. Number 2 is that professional services provided about who does what in the transaction. I want you to understand what the expectations are for what your real estate broker does and what all of the other people involved in the transaction do. Then your real estate goals. So a lot of my clients, I'd say 90% of my clients are real estate investors, and they're trying to acquire rental properties either by doing Nomad, moving in, getting really low down payments, and then moving into the next house after a year and repeating that process, or putting 15, 20, 25% down and buying rental properties for long-term buy and hold. So we talk about whatever your goals are, whether you're doing that, and then we talk about financing. So remember, people that came to the class last week, how many people came last week to the financing class? Okay, so it's 2 hours worth of financing stuff. So can you imagine trying to do 2 hours worth of financing stuff at one meeting? So really, we're just going over some basic stuff, and I'm telling you, go watch the financing video. If you've got additional questions, we could talk about it, okay? Receive property lists, how to get access to the list of properties as they come out and which ones you want. And then how to analyze the deal. Basically, I'll tell you how to get Brian's spreadsheet and use that. And then how to write an offer, what I'll need from you to write an offer. And that's usually what we discussed at the first meeting. Anyone who's working with another real estate agent that discusses something other than these steps, because I'm kind of curious to hear kind of your opinions about stuff. Anyone else work with any other real estate agents that covered anything other than this? Wow, it's really quiet in here tonight. No one has done anything else. Okay, good. So forms locally, I kind of talked about these. Definitions of working relationships, that's what describes the different ways real estate brokers can work with you. The exclusive right to buy listing contract, I'm going to go into a lot of detail with that. Brokerage disclosure regarding new construction, and then that professional service buyer. If you're buying in another market, if you're coming down here from Wyoming or in Denver or coming from another, or buying in another state, the forms will vary. These are not standardized across state lines. They're local to Colorado only. And some of these, like the brokerage disclosure regarding new construction, that is an attorney-specific form that we had prepared by the attorney for us. Is that correct? Yeah. So you probably won't get one of those from another real estate agent or the professional services provided. All right, so let's talk about the exclusive right to buy. So when you want to go work with a real estate broker, some real estate brokers are going to sit down with you and they're going to stick this form in front of you right away and say, please sign this. It means you're going to pay me a commission. I'm going to represent you, and you owe me 3% of the transaction whenever we close. Okay, so they'll sit down and they'll be pretty aggressive about it. So let's talk about what that is and how it works so that you have a much better understanding. If you want to see a copy of the form, you can go right to my website and see it. It's also available on the Colorado Division of Real Estate, Department of Regulatory Agencies Division of Real Estate. So if you go search for DORA, Colorado, D-O-R-A, Colorado, and you search for the exclusive right to buy listing contract, it'll pop right up. It's a form that all the real estate brokerages use. It's standardized. Okay? So what is it? It's the agreement between the buyer and the real estate broker outlining what you should expect from your real estate broker, how they have to act and what they need to do, and then what is expected of you as the buyer. What are your obligations as part of this agreement as well? Okay? It also talks about what the compensation is for real estate brokers. And let me just say right up front, there is absolutely no standard compensation for real estate brokers. It is all negotiable. Okay? So you can go in there and you could say to your real estate broker, you know, James, I would like to use you to buy my house, and I would like to pay you $100 to do so. You have every right to do that. And I have every right to say, I do not accept. Right? I could say to you, $100 is not enough, I'm not willing to do that. You can also go in there and say, you know, James, you're an amazing guy. I want to pay you 10%, not only commission on the property, but I want to give you 10% of the deal. I want to add you as a 10% member to the LLC, and that's what my compensation is to you for being my real estate broker. And I would say to you, I accept. Right? And there's range in the middle of what is normal and what is common. So what is the most typical real estate commission that you would hear in the marketplace? Because it's all negotiable, but what's the most common one you probably hear? Yeah, 3%. So that's pretty typical, okay? So it is not set by law. It is completely negotiable, but it is a very practical consideration. Now, here's another interesting point about this. Let's say you say to me, James, I really know what my investment strategy is. I want to go buy mobile homes. In fact, I want to buy the oldest, cheapest mobile homes I could possibly get because I think I could still rent those even if it's like 50 years old and falling apart. If I can get that thing, I could rent it for $500 a month all day long. And so I'm going to go find the crappiest stuff I can find. If we can find one for $10K, that's amazing. Now, would I be willing to work and help you find a mobile home when I'm getting paid a 3% commission on $10,000? What's 3% of $10,000? Anyone know? $300. So am I willing to do that in order to find a mobile home for you for 10 grand? Probably not. And so there could be minimals. There could be basically 3%, but if we're looking for stuff under 50,000 or under 100,000, it's going to be at least 3 grand or more. So you could set minimums on all those things. Okay? I was going somewhere with this. Was it the mobile home explanation?
You can set maximums too.
You sure can. Yeah, it's completely negotiable. Yep. Yeah, it is less common to set maximums. It is much more common to set minimums. Yep. Okay, so the exclusive right to buy, maybe I'll come back to me. The exclusive right to buy listing contract is both exclusive and irrevocable by default. What that means is you really should only have one agreement with one real estate broker. Now, there are some exceptions. How many people came to the class we did where we talked about how to get your real estate broker to bring you all the best deals? Did you guys pick up a bunch of stuff about how this thing being, if you're working with one real estate agent and you're covering a specific area and you're working with another real estate agent and you're working in another area, how that kind of comes into play? Remember that from that class? Same idea. So it's exclusive, but it's exclusive by usually geographic area. And so your real estate agent can say, I'm willing to represent you in Fort Collins, Loveland, Windsor, Greeley, but if you want to go down to Denver, I am not qualified to help you in Denver. I don't know the market, and so the real estate commission would not look kindly on me representing you in Denver because I'm incompetent in Denver market, and so you really should not have me represent you in Denver, okay? And if you decide, hey, listen, I realize you're incompetent in Denver, but I still want you anyway, you can do that, but real estate brokers should not try to overstep their boundaries and take transactions in markets where they're not qualified to do so, okay? So if you tell me I want to go to Longmont, I'm probably not representing you. Now, Brian may say to me, hey, listen, I know you don't know Longmont, but I would rather have you doing the paperwork and everything, and I realize your market knowledge down there is much weaker because you don't work down there, but I'd rather have you do the paperwork and stuff, and so I'd rather let you do Longmont than kind of have someone else do it, okay? All right, so it's exclusive. You have to work with one, unless you're working different areas. You could sign one with a real estate broker and do Loveland, and you could work with another real estate broker and do Fort Collins. You could do that. It's not super common. And irrevocable. So the standard way that the document is written, you are agreeing to whatever the term is or until you buy a house, and you cannot just say, I want to cancel. We're going to talk about that in detail here. So for us, basically it's the listing period, the term of the agreement that you sign with your real estate broker. They're going to put in a date, so it's either the date or when you buy a property. So let's say you go ahead and you sign an agreement that has a start date and an end date of a year. And you go and you buy a property in month 3. In month 4, you find another property. Are you obligated to continue to use this particular agent because you signed an exclusive right to buy listing contract with them? No, because the contract itself says it's either the end date of it or when you buy a property. It's whichever one comes first. Unless you had additional provision. So you could write in, hey, listen, this agreement does not cancel upon the purchase of a contract. It actually is the full year no matter how many properties you buy. Okay, but most real estate brokers are not going to do that. Okay? So it's really the start date to end date or when you actually buy a property. So it opens up an interesting point. So Brian goes out and he wants to buy a property. And I help him buy the property. It takes 3 months to do it. At the end of that, is he still obligated to use me as his real estate broker in order to buy the next one? No, he's not. Now, am I obligated to send him the best deals? Because with the exclusive right to buy listing contract, I have obligations to Brian, too, to send him all the deals that match his criteria. Am I now obligated to send him all these amazing deals? What if a really crazy half-off deal comes across my market, comes across my desk? Am I now obligated to send that to him? No, because there's no agreement for me, nor is there an agreement for him. So it cancels on both sides. So if you're kind of a perpetual buyer, you probably, in theory, should have buyer agency agreements in place at all times with the agent you're working with. Now, it does restrict you. If another agent brings you a deal, you can't go and work with that agent without maybe having another commission due unless your other agent's willing to let you out of the deal. But at the same time, that one agent is not required to send you stuff. Practical matter, though. If I know that Brian's buying all the deals I send his way and he doesn't have a buyer agency agreement in place, am I probably still going to show him that deal? What do you think? It's in my best interest to do so, right? Okay.
What's
So,
the actual technicality of you show me a property and property A, and then you show me property B, and then I buy property A, but property B I decide to buy as well? What's the technical? Is there wording in there? I can't remember.
there is holdover stuff, but I don't know if it is due for the second one. It's a weird case. Because it's talking about it's due on one transaction.
Like, and I can be under contract for both at the same time, right?
You can.
You could have two separate agreements, though.
You could have two separate agreements. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. All right. So you're committed to either one deal or the end date. We'll need a new agreement for each property you want to buy. I typically use a year, but in additional provisions, I use the following clause. So the overwhelming majority of real estate brokers are not giving you an instant out on their buyer agency agreement. How many people have signed a buyer agency agreement with another real estate broker before? Wow, not that many. Okay, so in that agreement, did the real estate broker say to you, hey, listen, if this doesn't work out, you can cancel at any time. In fact, I know that you'd be embarrassed about calling me up, so all you have to do is just send me an email that says, James, it's over. Have they said that to you? Yeah? Your guys have said that to you? Really? Wow, that's interesting. Most people say no, that most brokers are not willing to terminate. Okay? So the buyer has the right, this is what mine says. Buyer has the right to change the end date of this agreement in section 3.6 at any time with written notice. Email is acceptable to stop working with broker. Now, a practical matter. Why do I put this in here? Let's say I go drive Brian around, we show him 100 houses, and he says, you know, I found a deal off market, I'm going to go buy that. Why would I say, you know, you don't owe me anything. That's cool. Why would I do that? What's that?
You're never going to get it anyway. I mean,
Get what?
You're not going to fight for that and ruin your reputation over it.
Well, I think it's reputation. And I think the reason why you don't do it is for reputation reasons. Can you actually get one and earn it? I think you can. I think you sign an agreement and you really want to fight for it, you probably could. But really, if you think about it, if you're working with somebody, especially when you're working with a lot of investors that buy multiple properties, if I go do that to Brian and I say to him, okay, you know, you owe me a commission even though you're buying this other deal, that's probably the last property he's buying with me. Right? And I'd rather have him be happy and have long-term relationships than to do this one. Okay? So basically, any client can cancel at any time in the agreement. It is exceptionally rare for me not to put this in here. And the examples I could think of where I would not have this in here is examples where I would be doing marketing off-market for deals for clients. And in those cases, I would not put that in there. Because if I'm going to go put money out and do deals and do stuff specific for you, I'm probably not going to have you have the right to terminate without paying back the marketing. Okay, exclusive right to buy, continuing on. So what happens if a real estate agent is representing the seller and you're interested in buying the property with the same agent? Well, the agreement covers what happens in that case. Okay, so number 4.3.1.2, a buyer agency unless brokerage relationship exists with both. So if this box is checked, the broker represents buyer as buyer's agent and must treat the seller as a customer, unless broker currently has or enters into an agency or transaction brokerage relationship with the seller, in which case broker must act as transaction broker. So imagine this. I'm representing Brian, who's selling a property, and Adam wants to come in here and buy the property from me, and I'm representing him as well. So I go to Adam and say, listen, I know you're interested in Brian's property, but I'm representing Brian in this transaction too. So I know what his kind of negotiating points are. I know what his minimum numbers are and what he really needs to see out of his property and everything like that. I can't reveal his secrets without his permission to you. And you came in here and you said, listen, my absolute cap is $300K. I can't go a penny over. He's asking $305. I can't go reveal your secrets to Brian. So it puts me in this really awkward position. And so what the real estate commission says, if you actually select the right box, I can say, all right, I'm not going to actually represent you in your best interest and keep your secret and like use your secrets to negotiate the best deal, nor am I going to keep your secrets and negotiate the best deal for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to step back from the transaction. I'm going to call myself a transaction broker, and I'm going to act like a referee. I'm going to say, you want to buy, you want to sell, let me go shuffle the paperwork and do it. And if you say to me, do you think we can get it for 300? I say to you, I don't know. I can't actually give you any advice on that because all I can do is act like a referee. And if you say to me, hey, do you think we can squeeze him and get him to cover closing costs? I'd be like, I don't know. I can't tell you that. Transaction brokerage. I don't like being in that situation. And so I will almost always insist that I act as a buyer's agent or a seller's agent and not do this transaction baloney. Now, there are companies in town that their default is acting like referees. And so they don't actually go and give people advice, at least they're not supposed to. They don't actually give people advice. They want to act as referees the whole time. Okay? So I'm a big believer, like Tammy and I are about to hire a real estate broker in Illinois, and we will not accept transaction brokers. We had discussions about this. And yeah, so we will not allow that. We will tell them, you cannot ever switch to transaction brokerage. We're hiring you. We want you to represent our best interests, and we will not ever allow you to be transaction broker. And if you're unwilling to do that, that's a problem. Okay?
I think even if when you act as a transaction broker, which I'm sure is rare for you, but it's impossible, I think, for that person, especially if there's a long-standing relationship with one client
Agreed.
and the other, to actually be fair.
I think that's true. I think there's...
By default, though, you're not even supposed to be able to be a transaction broker if you've worked with that client before because you have inside knowledge.
That's right.
You know their situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very weird. Yeah. All right, so we'll talk about this. We discussed using one or more agents to find deals. All right, exclusive right to buy listing contract from Section 4.3.2. A transaction broker must perform the duties described in Section 5 and facilitate purchase transactions without being an advocate or agent for either party. That's what it says. So I can't advocate for either of you. I have to just kind of referee the transaction and try to get it done. I prefer to work with people as buyer's agents exclusively. Whether buyer's agent or transaction broker, the broker must perform uniform duties, and buyer's agents have some additional duties. So in that agreement itself, it has a section that says these are the uniform duties. This is what every real estate broker needs to do, whether they're buyer's agent, seller's agent, transaction broker. These are the things you absolutely have to do. And they're things like be honest, timely handle money, things like that. Okay? But buyer's agents have additional responsibilities like promote the best interests of your client, negotiate on their behalf, advise them on situations that you have knowledge of. Okay? Transaction brokers do not. Okay, brokerage firms' fees. So remember, this is all negotiable, but this is how typically real estate brokers are paid. Number one is they can get paid a success fee. Okay, so a success fee is when you buy a house, a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage is due. Okay, and so that is one way to do it. It's probably the most common. And so you guys all said the number in here. It's really common for a seller to pay the real estate broker 6%. And for that broker to share half of that with the buyer's agent that brings the buyer. So the seller's agent is going to collect 6% of the sales price, and half of it, 3%, is going to be paid to the buyer's agent when they bring the buyer. Now, if the seller's agent brings the buyer, they usually get the full 6%. Okay? They can be paid hourly. So you could say to your agent, hey, listen, I don't want to pay you 3%. I really just want to pay you, $200 an hour, and you will collect your hourly rate in order to help me buy this house. And in some cases, that may come out cheaper. You go out, you look at the first property, you decide that's a good one. That's easy. Or it could turn out to be much more expensive than a percentage. You go look at 100 houses. So hourly is one way to do it. Retainer. So you could actually have your real estate broker say, okay, I'm going to give you a $2,000 retainer. I want you to tick away at the retainer at $100 an hour. And then when that retainer gets down to 0, you replenish it back up to $2,000. You keep working until the end of the transaction. Or you could do other. You could say, hey, listen, I want to work with you on this deal, but I actually want to pay you half the deal. So I'll bring you in as a partner, you help me buy this transaction, and instead of paying you a commission, you're going to get half the deal instead. You can do something like that. Now, when you're talking about compensation for real estate brokers, realize it is not down payment plus success fee. So in almost all of the transactions, the real estate commission is built into the price. When you go shop for properties in the MLS, usually there's a real estate commission already built into the price of the property. Whether that's 3% or not is a different discussion because some of them are not. But let's say it is 3%, so you don't have to come up with 1% down to buy your first investment property, the owner-occupant Nomad property, and a success fee. It's just 1%. Okay? You don't have to come up with 20% down plus 3% for a real estate broker commission. It's just 20% down. So it's not in addition. It's one or the other. Yeah, good point. It comes out of the seller's proceeds when you close. So really the seller is paying it, and it's not in addition to your down payment. Okay? There is a pretty big exception to this, and that is for sale by owners. I'm starting to receive an email where they tell me the number of for sale by owners there are in our market at any given time, and it's pretty wide stretch. It goes all the way up into Estes Park and everything. But there's about 10 at any given time that are new on the market in a week. So if you kind of figure out what the numbers are, you can see about how many properties are for sale by owners. It's a very small percentage. The overwhelming majority of properties that are for sale are actually in the MLS. And I actually did a study on this once. I went to public record data for the year, and I looked at the total number of real estate transactions that occurred from public record data. And then I went and I looked at the total number of transactions that occurred in the MLS. And about 3% of the total transactions were not in the MLS. So if you think about it that way, 3 out of 100 or so. And I actually asked a couple title companies. I said, based on what you're seeing, because the title companies are usually closing the deals as well. I said, is that about right? And they're like, yeah. We usually see about maybe 1 out of 50 of them are for sale by owner transactions. Okay? So getting back to this thing, for sale by owner ones, those situations, because the sellers have not already pre-agreed upon a commission in some cases, that may be a down payment plus a success fee. So your down payment may be 5% of the property, plus you may need to come up with an additional 3% or so in order to have those transaction fees included for sale by owners. So it could be an additional expense. Now in some cases, you can actually negotiate to have the seller include those in the price because you may want to finance it. Okay? There's also a section if you're going to hire your real estate broker to negotiate a lease for you. So you can actually have a real estate broker negotiate a lease on your behalf, and that's an option in there too, and how to pay them. Okay. So success fee. So I typically use, when I fill out this paperwork for you guys, I typically use 3%. If you're buying a very low-cost property, like less than $100,000, I might, in some rare cases, set a minimum, but it's not that common. First of all, because there's not a lot of $100,000 properties in northern Colorado anymore. But 7.1.3, when earned. This is a really important section, so I want to read this to you so you understand what it means. This is right from the document itself. So when earned, when payable, purchase. The success fee is earned by brokerage firm upon the purchase of the property and is payable upon closing of the transaction. Makes sense, everybody, right? Basically, you're going to get 3% of the purchase price. It's going to be paid at closing. If any transaction fails to close as a result of the seller's default, so Brian's selling his property, he decides to screw this, I'm not selling my property anymore, I'm taking it off the market, it doesn't close, no commission is due. That's what it's going to want to say. With no fault on the part of the buyer, the success fee will be waived. Nothing's due. However, if any transaction fails to close as a result of buyer's default, in whole or in part, the success fee will not be waived. Such fee is payable upon buyer's default, but not later than the date that the closing of the transaction was to have occurred. So if you're going to buy a property and you decide, 3 weeks in, I changed my mind. I no longer want to buy this property. And there is no I changed my mind clause in the contract, by the way. Okay? So 3 weeks in, you're like, I changed my mind, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just not going to give the lender the rest of the documents they need. I'm not going to show up at closing. I realize that I'm forfeiting my earnest money. I'm just going to walk away. You are in default as the buyer. At that point, technically, a success fee would be due. Now, let's be practical about this. Brian decides, after buying the 3 properties or so that he's bought with me over the years, he decides, hey, I am not going to complete this next transaction. I don't care anymore. I found out after my inspection period there was meth in the property. I'm walking away. This $3,000 in earnest money, that's like nothing compared to what it would cost me I'd lose on this deal. So I'm actually going to voluntarily default. I'm going to just give my earnest money away and just let it go. Technically, commission would be due because Brian has defaulted. Now, am I going to go chase Brian down for a commission? What do you think, Brian? Am I going to go knock on your door and say, hey, listen, buddy, you defaulted on this one. You owe me $9K. Think that's going to happen? Yeah, probably not. Okay? And for obvious reasons. Okay. So who will pay brokerage firm's fee? There are 3 choices on this agreement. What's that? Maybe that's right. He's not here to defend himself, so probably not. Okay. There you go. So who pays the real estate broker's fee? There are 3 choices on the agreement. 7.3.1 is a section. Listing brokerage firm or seller may pay. Buyer is obligated to pay. Broker is authorized and instructed to request payment of the brokerage firm's fee from the listing brokerage firm or seller buyer is obligated to pay any portion of brokerage firm's fee which is not paid by the listing brokerage firm or seller. So you might say, you know, James, I don't know if I like that option. You're basically saying you're going to try to collect it from the seller, but if you can't collect it from the seller, then you're saying I'm obligated to pay for that. Right? As buyers, you're like, I don't know if that's such a good idea. But what it does, and this is what I typically use, this is my typical default.
Actually, we are not defaulting.
There's an exception. I'll talk to you about this. This is our default when we're actually not picking a select property. I'll talk about it in a second. I'm going to go into detail. So it allows me, in this particular scenario, when you check this box, it allows me in situations where the commission is already not predefined in the MLS, for example, a for sale by owner, for me to go negotiate on your behalf and get a seller to include the commission. If we do not check this box, I cannot go and try to negotiate to have the seller pay the commission for you, because I am then trying to negotiate for myself in the actual negotiation. And if you're not obligated to pay, I'm not negotiating on your behalf. Does that make sense? Okay? So by saying that you are obligated, it changes who I'm negotiating for. I'm now negotiating for you to try to get you to save having to come out of pocket to do it. But if I don't have this checked, I'm just negotiating on my behalf trying to get my commission. And that's not allowed.
And that's from the Division of Real Estate.
That is from the Division of Real Estate.
That and various updates for brokers that if you're putting anything in the contract about commission, you have to have that box on your agency.
Correct. Correct. So that's the typical default of why we would do it this way. Without this being selected, I'm not allowed to negotiate on your behalf. Okay. Now, here's two other options. Buyer will pay. Buyer's obligated to pay brokerage firm's fee. So this doesn't even say, I'm going to go try to get the seller to pay it all. The buyer is obligated to pay. And I remember there's a client in this room where once we were doing an off-market deal, and I had marked this box. And he'd seen this form several other times before. And I had marked this box. Buyer will pay. Buyer's obligated to pay brokerage firm fee. And he's like, why are you doing that? I don't understand what's going on. And it was because in this particular transaction, I was not intending ever to go and talk to the seller and try to get their fee. It was basically, buyer, you're paying for it. Okay? And so this is an example where you might do that. Like if I'm going and doing marketing for you off market, I'm going to put out mail and I'm going to go on seller presentations and I'm going to try to find you a deal off market. I'm not going to go and talk to the seller and be like, hey, listen, would you pay me a commission on this deal? It's like the buyer. You're agreeing to pay the marketing costs plus a commission in order for me to go out there and find you a deal, and we're going to do it that way. Okay? And you're agreeing to pay up front. So I rarely use this unless we're doing off-market stuff. 7.3.3, or if it's a specific property where we know that the buyer is paying. So this is not a generic, we're going to go look for properties. It's, I'm buying 1234 Main Street, it's off market. Okay, I'm going to write the agreement just for that address, and I'm going to check this box. Okay? The other way is 7.3.3, listing brokerage firm or seller may pay. However, buyer's not obligated. If for some reason they don't pay me, sucks to be me. Okay? That's what this one says. Broker is authorized to obtain payment of brokerage firm's fee from the listing brokerage firm or seller, provided buyer has fulfilled buyer's obligations in this buyer listing contract. Buyer is not obligated to pay brokerage firm's fee. And Tammy was trying to say that we like this one too. If we're going to go find a property in the MLS and you're going to go under contract and we're going to put the specific address of the property in there, like, you know, a property that's already listed and we already know they're paying 3%, I don't need to go negotiate for you. I don't need to do this one anymore. I could just go and do this one because there's no reason for you to be obligated to anything. We already know it's 3%. Does that make sense? Okay.
We default there too, though, if we're just in MLS searches, because
True.
if something came up, we could just drop a new agreement in that situation.
That's a good point.
That way people are more comfortable.
So,
because when you see that box checked that says you're obligated to pay, that's a little alarming if you're the buyer.
yeah. And so what Tammy's saying is if our agreement says we're only looking for properties for you inside the MLS, where we know that there's already going to be a commission included, sometimes we'll just check this box. Because there's not going to be a situation, according to the properties we can find, where the commission will be less. Okay? If no box is checked, if your real estate broker is lazy and they're too lazy to check one of the three boxes, guess which one's the default? This one, the one where you're not obligated to pay. Okay? So that's the default if you don't click it. So what if these two things cost the same? What if this crazy Lamborghini, super nice sports car costs the exact same thing as this POS, you know, I don't know what that is, car that's like falling apart. It looks like some type of Mazda that got in a car accident. What if those cost exactly the same? In the real estate brokerage world, this is true all the time. A brand new, very well-meaning, sincere new real estate agent that's never done a transaction but doesn't know what's going on costs the exact same as a 10+ year veteran that does 50 transactions a year and knows everything there is to know. They're exactly the same cost. So when you're out there choosing a real estate broker, don't worry about this cost-wise. You want to find the best you can because it costs you the same amount of money. Does that make sense? Okay. So what happens if I'm showing Brian, 20 properties, and he decides after, property 20, he happens to, drive by with his spouse after the meeting or, after the showing of it, and the seller's coming out and grabbing mail, and he stops, he pulls over to the window and says, "Hey, Miss Seller, I was looking at your property earlier today. I think we're pretty interested in it. We're thinking about buying it." And the seller's like, "That's great. I'll tell you what, though. My listing with the seller's agent is actually up here in 2 days. And I'll tell you what, if you wait 2 more days until our agreement is over, why don't we just split the 6% I was going to pay in commission? You'll get a 3% discount, and I will actually get 3% more. We'll just go ahead and wait 3 more days because it doesn't really matter," right? That's what this clause means. Okay, it's the holdover period. What it basically says, if I went and I showed a property to Brian and I helped him, along the process of buying that, even if he sends me the email and says, "James, we're done with our agreement. I don't want to work with you anymore." If I showed him a property during that time, then a commission is still due up to 90 days after. So if you were going to do this deal with that seller, you'd have to do 91 days. Okay? That's what the agreement says. Does that make sense? Now, there's another checkbox on there that says, listen, if you terminate the buyer's agency agreement with me, Brian, and then you go and immediately hire another buyer's agent tomorrow, and you buy one of the properties we looked at together, is there a commission still due to me, or is it due to the new agent, or both? And so the checkbox here says whether or not you're released of commissions if you hire another buyer's agent and they help you buy a property we looked at. So whether that's checked or not determines whether 2 commissions are due or 1. All right, limitation on third-party compensation. So for a lot of my clients, they'll ask me, "James, so who do you recommend for a lender? Or who do you recommend for a title company? Or who do you recommend for a handyman service?" Or anything like that. So what I do is I go out in the community and I say, "Hey, listen, highest bidder, who's going to give me the highest fee for referring business to them?" So I go and I look for the lender that's going to give me $1,000 every time I refer a person to them. And the handyman that for every hour they charge, they're going to give me half of their hourly rate. Isn't that what I do? No, I don't do that at all. Because if I did, I would have to disclose that to you. I am not allowed to receive any type of kickback in any form. So you can rest assured that if I'm giving you a recommendation, it's because I think they're the best one I know of. They're the most reliable. They're the best price. They have the best service. And it is not because I'm going to be financially rewarded for doing so. Okay? I would have to have you sign a written form that's called an affiliated business relationship. And many of you may have signed them. Because a lot of brokerages in town, they're in bed with other lenders and they're in bed with title companies. Some of them are in bed with insurance companies. And they'll have you sign this form that says, "Hey, listen, I have an affiliated business relationship with this title company. If you use this title company, the real estate broker or real estate brokerage itself will actually get a kickback." And that's what that's disclosing. Okay, so here's the buyer's obligations to broker. So this is what you have to do when you're working with a real estate broker and you have this agreement. You have to conduct all negotiations through the broker. You can't go and talk to the seller straight yourself. Okay? Refer all communication received from brokers, prospective sellers, or any other source to broker. So if the broker for the seller calls you and says, "Hey, listen, are you okay with doing this? Your other broker is not responding to my phone calls," you're not supposed to answer them. You're supposed to send it back through us. Okay? Are you working with any other broker? You need to disclose that. Okay? All right. Right to cancel. This is the interesting one. So these are the standard defaults in the contract. So section 10.1, the right of the buyer to cancel. These are your rights to be able to cancel this agreement. In the event the broker defaults, so if I screw up, and it's going to talk about what that means. Under this buyer listing contract, the buyer has the right to cancel this buyer listing contract, including all rights of brokerage firm to any compensation in the buyer agency box at the top of page 1 is checked. So if for some reason I screw up, I don't actually get paid, and the termination and the thing is terminated. Examples of broker default. So it tells you what I have to do in order to screw up. Include but are not limited to 1, abandonment of buyer. You're calling me, I'm not calling you back. That's abandonment. Okay? Number 2, failure to fulfill all material obligations of broker. If I'm going around town saying all your secrets to people, that is not okay. 3, failure to fulfill all material uniform duties. So basically telling you stuff, keeping you in the loop, all things like that. Or if the buyer agency box at the top of page 1 is checked, the failure to fulfill all material additional duties of buyer agency. Any rights of buyer that accrued prior to cancellation will survive such cancellation. So even if you terminate the agreement because I'm in default, I still shouldn't go around telling people your secrets. All right, so now that's basically how you can default, how you can actually terminate the agreement. Not a lot of ways, right? I basically have to screw up for you to terminate, except for we can have that section at the end where you can send me an email. Section 10.2, write a broker to cancel. So how can I cancel? A lot more wide open. Brokerage firm may cancel this buyer listing contract upon written notice to buyer if buyer fails to reasonably cooperate with broker or buyer defaults under this buyer listing contract. So if you're being difficult to work with, I don't think you're reasonably cooperating. I'm going to terminate the agreement. I no longer have to represent you anymore. Okay? Any rights of brokerage firm that accrued prior to cancellation will survive such cancellation. Okay, so if there's anything that happened beforehand, I get to continue doing that. Any questions on right to cancel? Sweet. Cost of third-party services. So 11 talks about things like appraisal and inspection and meth testing and sewer scope testing and things like that. I am not paying for those on your behalf. Those are all fees that you have to incur yourself when you're buying the property. Section 12.2, showing properties. This shows you what I'm allowed to show you. I can show you pretty much any property in the MLS, but in some cases we're restricted on doing things. So like if a seller is unable to give us access to property, sometimes we can't do that. The brokerage through the brokerage firm has access to the following multiple listing services, so they're supposed to disclose to you what they have access to. If a broker doesn't have access to Iris or the Denver MLS through Iris or something like that, they should let you know that there's a limitation of what properties they can show you. These are talking about merging, by the way. So if they do that, it should actually open up some stuff for you. Can I disclose your identity? So what happens if there's a lot for sale on South Fort Collins and Walmart comes in, and now as soon as the seller knows that it's Walmart, they jack the price up by 3, right? That's a problem for Walmart. So usually Walmart will require that you keep their identity secret. Now for you, is it going to matter that a seller knows that it's you buying the property? They're going to find out when you get your loan. They're going to find out later on anyway. So most of the time, in almost all cases, you're not going to hide your identity. But if you were a big company and you were coming in and wanted to buy stuff, you'd probably want to hide your identity. Okay?
One-off situations where maybe you didn't realize it, but you know the seller, and there's some weird.
I could see that.
I think we've had one situation like that.
Yeah, but how would we do it on the contract?
Exactly, the problem is on the contract.
So you'd have to have like an entity or something like that, like some type of entity, LLC or trust or something. Yeah, it's really rare. 14, disclosure of settlement services. You know that attorneys and title companies and everything, their quality varies and their prices vary. You get to choose those. And then it's non-discrimination. I cannot discriminate against any of you at all. Recommendation of legal and tax counsel. You should talk to an attorney. You should talk to your tax advisor about signing any of these things or buying real estate. And you're agreeing to meditation. And if there is any type of meditation or dispute, yeah, you're doing meditation. So you're agreeing to meditation and mediation. And if you, that's right. And if basically if there is a dispute of any kind, that's it. We're going to work it out. And then you got to pay the attorney's fees after you're done meditating. So whoever wins the dispute, the attorney's fees get paid by the other party. You're agreeing to that in front. All right, and then additional provisions. This is what I usually have in here. I'm really surprised that you guys actually do it because almost every time I've taught this class in the past, no one's told me that their agent will let them out of agreements. It's pretty uncommon, actually. So buyer has right to change end date of this agreement, section 3.6 at any time with written notice. Email is acceptable to stop working with broker. Unless something like this is written in, it doesn't matter. The agreement says you cannot terminate unless the broker's in default. All right, so some of you are like, James, I just want to actually go tell 25 different real estate brokers the types of deals I want and wait for the best ones to bring me the best deals. I don't want to limit myself working with one broker and have them be limited to that. Sure. So buyer's agent of working exclusively with one, the benefits are the buyer's agent is obligated to send you deals that match your criteria. If you don't go sign buyer's agency agreements with the broker you're working with, they are under no obligation to send you the deals. In fact, if they have buyer agency agreements with other buyers, they are obligated to send them those first, right? If Brian and I have a buyer's agency agreement and Adam happens to want to buy a deal, but he's like, I just want to go shop around and have like 10 different agents. If you find me a deal, bring it to me. I have to send it to Brian first. He has to pass. And then once he passes, now I can send it to you because I have an obligation to actually represent his best interests. You just happen to be sloppy seconds, right? I mean, you basically get his leftovers, in other words, because I have an obligation to him. I do not have one to you, okay? So I shouldn't keep properties secret for my best clients. That's not how it works. It's if I have an agreement with you, I'm supposed to send them over to you. And I'm supposed to promote the interests of the buyer with the utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. If I sent it to you first, I'd be not doing this for Brian, and he'd have a case against me. Make sense? And as you do multiple transactions, I can do some pretty amazing things for clients, like write really strong letters to make your case for the seller accepting the deal. I will tell you, this makes all the difference in the world. Having a really strongly written letter from the real estate broker saying, I've closed 10 transactions with this person, in deals where it started looking shaky with their lender, they just paid cash and closed on deals. Stuff like that makes a huge difference in getting deals done. The downsides, each agent has a limited view of the world. So if Brian has an agreement with me, I only know about certain things. I may not know about a crazy amazing deal in Old Town, so he may miss out on that deal. It's legit fact. Each agent has different areas of expertise and knowledge levels. So if he wants to go buy a commercial building in Old Town, I may not be the guy. If he wants to go buy 4 plexes or 16 plexes or whatever like that, I probably am the guy. All right, so here are the benefits and downsides of working with multiple agents. The benefits is you might get more exposure to inside deals. You can say, I've got 20 agents looking for deals. The one agent happened to find one. They didn't have a buyer that would take it down themselves. They sent it to me. I did the deal. I got one that I probably wouldn't have otherwise gotten. However, inside deals may violate the fiduciary obligations they have to the seller. So how do most inside deals come about? Yeah, because they actually represent the seller. So they're representing the seller, and then they say, hey, the seller's like, hey, I'm motivated. I need a deal right now. And so now they're going and finding one person to talk to. Is that really representing the best interest of the seller? Are they giving them maximum exposure and trying to get maximum price? No. And so they're probably violating that obligation they have to the seller by bringing the deal to you and saying, hey, lowball them. They're motivated. And people believe they may see more deals. I'd tell you, my experience has not been the case. My experience is that when you go and you have 20 different agents working for you, you basically have no agents working for you. Downsides, because you have loose relationships with multiple agents, they tend to serve you as their last resort to working clients that are exclusively working with them. In fact, they probably are obligated to serve the exclusive relationships first. They may be bringing you deals where they represent the seller, not you, so you have no one representing you in the transaction. And depending on your agreement, you could owe multiple brokerage fees if you have multiple ones. Okay? All right, so that was the paperwork section of the first meeting. Now I don't have to cover that with you when we sit down together, because that took an hour. All right, so professional services provided. So on your sheet there in front of you, you've got a list of all the different things that need to happen or should happen a lot of times with real estate transactions. So who does the appraisal of the property? Is that a real estate brokerage activity? Is that your real estate broker doing that? Who does it? Your appraiser. Who does assistance with showings? Who gets you into properties? Real estate broker. Who determines the condition of the property? Who says if it's livable or not livable, or you like the condition or you don't like the condition? Inspector or you? Contract acceptance. Who accepts the terms of the contract? You do, the buyer. Who drafts the contract? Who actually writes legal stuff? The attorney, not me. Who does the preparation of the contract? Who fills in the blanks on the state-approved contract? I usually do, yep. Who provides a home warranty? A warranty that if something happens after the property for the first year or so, you can pay a small service fee and they'll fix it. So it's a home warranty company. Who pays for it could be the seller, it could be a real estate broker, it could be you as the buyer. But the warranty itself is provided by the home warranty company. Improvement location certificate is the thing that shows you where the items are located on the property itself. Who provides that to you or who does it for you? Surveyor. Yep. So if you're saying, hey, listen, that shed looks like it's over the property line, is your real estate broker qualified to say, yep, it is over the property line, or nope, it's on your property? They are not qualified to do that. You need a survey. You need an ILC. Who does the inspection on the property? Yeah, home inspector or you. Your real estate broker is not qualified to go and say, oh, no, that's just a black scuff on the wall. That's not mold. Right? They're not qualified to do that. You've seen that before, right? Who selects the inspector? The buyer does. Yeah, not your real estate broker. Your real estate broker can give you a list, but they're not going to tell you, use this guy, and you have to. You have choice of anyone you want. Who gives you legal advice? Yeah, what about, hey, James, what does this section of the contract mean? Or what does this section of the lease mean? Not qualified. Lender selection. Who selects your lender? Buyer does. Who gives you a list of home inspectors? We did that one, real estate broker. Who gives you a list of lenders? Real estate broker does. Who determines the loan rate or the term decision? Who says, I want this interest rate and I want this term of my loan of the ones available? You all do. Who evaluates the market, tells you, our days on market's really low, prices have been going up about 3% a year. Who determines market evaluation? What's going on? Your real estate broker tells you what the market's doing. If you're concerned about Megan's Law, knowing where sex offenders are, who's responsible for that? Who is? The buyer is. Yep. You have to go look at a list online if you want to know about that. Who's responsible for testing whether there's been meth done in the property or meth cooked in the property?
Drug dealers.
Industrial hygienist. You got to hire one to do a test if you're really concerned about it. Who inspects the property for mold?
You do.
Your inspector usually does, or industrial hygienist as well. Who negotiates on your behalf?
Most inspectors won't actually, like I say, I think that's mold.
Right, you have to have someone who specializes in it come out, sure. Yep. Who does your negotiations? Real estate broker does. Who determines whether neighborhoods have crime or how much crime they have? And by the way, all neighborhoods have crime. Yep, you can go talk to the police or look it up online. Who provides the new loan? Your lender. Who evaluates structural stuff? You look down in the basement, the wall's kind of leaning this way. Your real estate broker says, oh no, that's a normal curve. That's a strength curve. Triangles are strong. No. Structural engineer, okay? Survey. Who does the survey? Surveyor, yep. What about taxes? Who determines the taxes on the property? The assessor, yep. Termites. Who determines if the property has termites? By the way, do we have termites here in northern Colorado? Yeah. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Really uncommon, but we do have termites. I had a property, someone terminated because there were termites and termite damage underneath. Title examination. Who evaluates the title for the property? You and your attorney, not your real estate broker. They're not qualified. So here are all the answers. You can go look at that later on. All right, so your real estate goals, we talked about this before. We usually sit down, we're talking about whether you're doing owner-occupant, whether you're doing Nomad, whether you're doing buy and hold, lease options, fix and flip, any creative transactions like buying on lease option or buying subject to, or wraps or things like that. We talk about where to get access to the Nomad calculator to be able to do all the modeling yourself. You can plug in your own property numbers and do that. And clients can schedule time with me even beyond the first meeting, because sometimes you go to your first meeting, we sit down, we talk about what you want to do, which a lot of times is wholesaling for a lot of people. They say, hey, I want to wholesale, I want to wholesale, I want to wholesale. And then 3 months later, they come back and say, okay, I tried that wholesaling thing, let's talk about Nomad. And then we end up talking about their new goals. Okay? All right, first meeting real estate, so we talked about that. Financing, that was last week's class. 2 hours of financing stuff. So it's covered there. The classes are available here for clients. You can go access that. You can also discuss one-on-one. So a lot of times you'll sit through the 2-hour financing class, and then we'll get out in the field, and you'll be like, so I want to buy a property, but I don't know what I should do with financing. And then we talk about the strategies that are appropriate for you in that situation. Okay? Receiving property lists. So there's an entire class coming up. I think it's next week, right? Next week is Finding Amazing Real Estate Deals. That is, you can register for that. And then jamesdoer.com, there's a class, because we've taught all these classes once before at this point. So there's a recording for just about every class now, unless we tell you it's brand new. I think we have, but they've been recorded now more than once. We've been doing these classes in 2003. Some of this stuff is, seen multiple iterations. All right, so that's receiving property lists and analyzing deals. So we usually talk very little about this at the first meeting. A lot of times I'll send someone to the deal analysis video. I'll have them download Brian's spreadsheet, which that's Brian back there. He built this amazing spreadsheet here. You can go download it right here, learntobirich.com/spreadsheet. It's just free download. It is the one that we teach from. It's probably one of the best spreadsheets out there for analyzing deals. I had a spreadsheet that I had built. Brian's looks pretty complicated. Mine was like crazy, much more complicated. But we don't teach from mine because it's just confused everybody and it's just really thing. Mine actually is called Sasquatch because we often talk about it, but it is never seen. because I don't show it to anybody because they're just like, what the heck, this thing's crazy. So Brian's spreadsheet, though, is just one step down from crazy. It's like really, really good, very detailed, awesome stuff.
With all the stuff you keep asking for, soon enough it'll be crazy.
It's basically going to be Sasquatch. Actually, it'll never quite be Sasquatch. There's some things in there that I just built very differently than how you built it. But yeah, it's really, really good. It's good stuff.
I need to do to match Sasquatch is use those little
Spark lines?
spark lines.
Yeah, that has some spark line stuff. Yeah, it does have a lot of those. But it does do some really wicked like partnership stuff. And yeah, there's some pretty great stuff. So there's a whole bunch of classes. We have a whole class on how to analyze deal Brian spreadsheet, how to analyze a deal when you're selling on a lease option, how to analyze multifamily deals. And then there's a Nomad calculator, which is different than Brian's spreadsheet in that you can say, this is what a house that I'm buying now looks like. What would it look like if I bought the same house, assuming it goes up in value a little bit each year, over 10 years? So I buy 10 houses over 10 years with some appreciation, with some rents going up, with some other expenses, and it shows you how your whole portfolio does. That's what the Nomad calculator does as well, and that's right here. Another, probably the best book I know of to teach you the basics of how to analyze deals, it's like a thorough, kind of from the beginner on how to do analysis, is the Hold book by Gary Keller. Anyone read that book? Yeah, it's a good like overview book, right? Yeah.
If you spend a year here in class, you will flip through it very quickly.
Yeah, it's like really entry level. Once you do this like first, how to analyze the O'Brien spreadsheet, you're probably beyond it. And that's like a 2-hour class. And then Tammy and I decided, I don't know, a month ago or so, that we were going to start offering this as a beta service to clients. But if you're a client of mine, you're looking at a property, instead of me lowballing you on rents, you come into a property and I'm like, oh, you can get, $1,100 all day long on this property. It turns out it's $1,800 a month rent. Instead of me doing that to you, we actually now provide rent comps. So you can go call us or email Tammy, and she will pull up you need bedrooms and the address, right? Number of bedrooms and the address, and whether it's an apartment or single-family home. And then it does a whole report and shows you actual rent comps. You can go through and cross off the ones that are not really comparable, and then see what the actual numbers are for rents. So it's historical rental data is what we provide now for investor clients, and we'll see how that works out. We got a year-long subscription, so I'll have that for a year at least. And if it works well, we'll continue it. So in another market, I have a bunch of other tools. This is some stuff on how to analyze deals. So we can search in our local market for cash-on-cash deals. So you can go there, search by cash-on-cash deals. If you want to analyze properties for doing Nomad analysis, you can go here. For doing buy and hold, basically I did at one point, and I haven't updated in a while, but I basically programmed Brian's spreadsheet onto the web so that people could click on an MLS number instead of having to go and manually transfer all the stuff that was pre-entered. So basically it does Brian's stuff on here in order to do that. And then if you want to figure out what comps are, if you're doing any type of analysis for doing fix and flip, or you're concerned about buying a property, making sure it's under value, which we're much more concerned about cash on cash here. But you can go figure out comparables and pricing tools on that, and then there's a bunch of stuff on MLS if you want to do that too. All right, first meeting, so we talked about that, analyzing deals, then we're talking about writing offers. So usually talk the very tiniest bit about what we're going to need in order to write an offer at the first meeting, and basically you're going to get it via DocuSign. So we cover this in detail when we talk about the class, making strong offers that get accepted. Usually at the first meeting, I'm going to tell you the basic stuff we're going to need. We're going to need a lender letter. We're going to need the information you're going to want, how you're going to hold title, the name of the LLC or your name, and some things like that. But we're not going into a ton of detail because, as you can see, it took us an hour and 10 minutes to get to this point. So by this point, you're just like swimming and a little overwhelmed. All right, buying process overview. So that was the first meeting with your real estate agent. Now we're going to step back and say, what's the next step in the buying process? So once we're done having lunch at Qdoba for the first time and we're going to go over things, the next step is, what do you need to do as homework between when we finish our meeting to when we go look at properties for the first time? You guys have some homework to do. So what does that look like? These are the steps. Number one is you got to get qualified with a lender. Unless you're paying cash, then we just need proof of funds. You get a pre-approval letter from your lender so that we can actually go out there and we know we're not showing you $600,000 properties when you only can afford $200,000. We're going to talk about how much you're going to need for earnest money and where you're going to get it from. Then we're going to talk about how much you're going to need for down payment. We're talking a little bit about loans. You're going to figure out where you're going to get that from. And then a lot of times, I'm going to send over a sample contract for you if you want to see it ahead of time, because there's nothing worse than seeing a property at work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, saying, I get off work at 6, James, can you meet me over there? You go there, it is the perfect property for you, you're in love with it, you've got low blood sugar because you came, you didn't eat dinner, you're all excited, you're scared, you're nervous, and you've never read the contract before. And now you got to run home, hustle, call your lender, get your lender letter. You got to go figure out what a 19-page real estate commission contract is. You know, you're all flustered. You're like, am I making the right decision? We've only looked at one property before. How do we know this is the right one? But it feels so right. It's amazing. And now you're trying to figure out the contract. I'd rather the contract be taken out of that equation completely so that you feel super comfortable with that. And then all you're worrying about is this the right one? You're not worried about the 19-page contract that night. Make sense? So we usually give you a copy of that and go over it with you ahead of time, or you go over it with your attorney too. So let's talk about qualify for lender. We talked about this in the financing class in detail. Call one or more lenders and get qualified. The ultimate goal from this qualification at this point is to get a pre-approval letter. You want to find out what your max is for doing that. You'll want to make a formal application, understand what they'll need and provide it to them as soon as possible. Get rates from them so you'll know what to plug in when you do your deal analysis and what your monthly payment's going to be. Okay? And know your comfortable payment number and the max. Because a lot of times you say, in an ideal world, James, I'd like to live in Old Town on 3 acres and spend less than $200K. Probably not happening, guys. Okay? So you may want to know that the max you can do is $400, so that if you really want Old Town, you're probably looking at $400 at a minimum. Okay? All right, so pre-showings, that's qualified with lender. The pre-approval letter, you should have this before you look at properties. The time to do this, I'll use the example again, 6 o'clock at night, we're going to look at a property, and your lender is now with their daughter at the ballet recital, and they're not calling you back that night, and you need to get an offer in because there's 4 other offers already. Okay? So you want to get a letter that we can use as a default if you can't get a hold of your lender that night. So get the pre-approval letter, and so when we make the offer, we're ideally going to adjust it for the exact price, but if we don't have that, we'll use your max letter. Okay? Earnest money, so figure out what you're going to need and how that works. Typically, earnest money is due after you've had a contract accepted. We'll usually put in there that there's 2 days or 3 days for you to get the earnest money to the earnest money holder. Earnest money amount typically works out to be 1% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $300,000 property, you're typically going to need about $3,000 in earnest money. Now the question is it always $3,000? No. What if they ask for $3,000? Can you come in low and say, hey, listen, I'm doing a VA loan. I'm going to be putting nothing down. I really only even have $1,000 I can do for earnest money right now. Can I do $1,000? Is that possible? Yeah. Now, does that make your offer weaker? Yes, it does. Okay? So in an ideal world, I would recommend that you match earnest money that they're asking for. And they can say, hey, listen, we want $5,000 when it's really a $300,000 property. They can totally say that. It's negotiable. Okay? It's usually going to be a personal check, although in some really rare cases they may request it in certified funds. So once it's accepted, once the contract's accepted, usually Tammy or I will coordinate with you as to where to get the earnest money to. A lot of times it's the title company or the seller's real estate broker's office for those two. And then once we give it to them, we're going to get an earnest money receipt. And then earnest money counts. It applies towards your purchase. So if you put up $3,000 for earnest money, you don't have to have $3,000 for earnest money plus whatever down payment. That is part of your down payment. So if you only had to put 1% down, you're doing the 1% down conventional loan, it is a 1% earnest money payment that applies. So that may be all you need for down payment. You may have additional closing costs, but that's going to be the down payment part. Okay? Now, is earnest money refundable? It depends. It depends on what you're talking about by refundable. If you waived your inspection and you want to get your money back because you found out something about the property that would have been covered under inspection, then no, earnest money is not refundable. Okay? But if you have a normal inspection period and during the inspection period something comes up that makes you want to terminate based on inspection, you can terminate and earnest money should be refundable at that point. Can a seller fight you on getting earnest money back if they thought you didn't play fair? Even if they didn't think you played fair, can they say, no, I'm not going to release your earnest money. I refuse to sign this. You were a jerk. You came and looked at my property and you said some really mean things about the art I had on my wall and I actually had something recording you in my house. Can the seller say, I'm just not signing the earnest money release? Yeah, they can. What is that? What happens then? You have an earnest money dispute, and actually you need to someone needs to file, basically once they give you the deadline, someone needs to file a lawsuit to fight you for your earnest money. You're going to go fight over it. Or after a certain period of time, if they don't file a lawsuit, whoever the holder is probably will release it to you. Okay? But you have to fight it. Especially, what if you're really tight on earnest money? You're like, I only have this 5% down, this $15K, and you put up $5,000 for earnest money, you're out of the game until that earnest money gets released. Okay? And in some cases, they'll actually deposit the earnest money, and they'll say, takes me 10 days for it to clear my account and be able to give you earnest money back. So if that's all the money you have, realize you could be delayed for a week, 10 days.
Depends on how quickly you terminate.
That's true.
Like if you put up earnest money right away and it's already cleared and you terminate 2 weeks in, and then probably not.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Okay, so we covered all that. So pre-showings, continuing on. So down payment. So we have an entire class on how to get down payment stuff. You need to disclose if you have this when you make your offer. So I get this question a lot from wholesalers. They're like, James, I'm going in here and I'm going to make an offer for all cash. Do I need to have the cash myself in order to be able to make an all cash offer? And technically, you do not, but there is a checkbox in the contract as to whether or not you have the money or do not have the money. And an astute seller's real estate broker, seeing that you don't have the money, is going to ask questions. Hey, I see you're making a cash offer, but you mark down that you do not have the funds available. What's going on? And then you're going to have to come up with a really creative story, because most sellers' agents are going to say, yeah, so you're really just messing with me. You're not serious. Okay? So that actually applies to both down payment and if you're paying all cash, as to whether or not you have the funds required to close. If you need to make down payment, you'll need to figure out the source of it, and your lender may also need to know where it's coming from. So if you're going to get creative with where your down payment is coming from, your brother's got some drug money and he's going to provide it to you, or your parents are going to give you a gift or something like that, you may want to run this by your lender way ahead of time. That's why it's listed on here, to talk about with your lender, because you're going to need to source it. You need to have it documented where it comes from. And legacy nomads, if legacy nomads is nomads who their parents or grandparents are gifting them down payment in order to do the nomad model. So if you're going to do that, you're going to need to source the gift. So you're going to need to figure out how to source that and talk to your lender about, my grandparents or my parents are going to give me the down payment money. Okay, make sure you cover that ahead of time. And finally, the mock contract basically talks about the two different ones to use. If you've got tenants, we're going to use the income property. If you don't have tenants, we're going to use the normal contract. And we can go over either one, the examples of both. And then these are the additional disclosures and addendums you should probably review too. We have a whole 2-hour class on sellers' property disclosures. What's typical, what's normal, how you read them, interpret them, what they mean. And then source of water addendum, which is where your water is coming from. Square footage disclosure, which is it's basically silly. It's basically telling you that if you're really concerned about square footage, measure it yourself. And then lead-based paint disclosure. If there's lead-based paint knowledge, if there's knowledge of lead-based paint in the property, you need one of those if the property was built before 1979, I believe. And then if it's in Fort Collins, the occupancy limits disclosure telling you that the 3 unrelated rule in Fort Collins is no joke, and that there's like a $10,000 or $1,000 a day per person that's over the 3 fine if you don't follow it. And we have entire classes on writing offers that are coming up and recorded as well. All right, so now we've covered. Yeah, what's up? Yeah.
Do you have to show the lead-based paint documentation if the home was built after 78?
No, not at all. If it's built after 78, you don't have any requirement at all. If it is built before 1978, you need the lead-based paint document even before the contract. Yep. No, the actual signed thing, you need that before the contract itself. So you cannot even make an offer without that sign from the seller where you're acknowledging it before you make the offer. We've had some really weird, sticky situations come up where some real estate brokers played a little loosey-goosey, and they're like, oh, we'll get you that later, don't worry about it. Or, yeah, just fill in a blank one and do that, and we'll be good. No, it has to be signed from the seller. Seller needs to disclose to the buyer the situation before the contract is submitted on lead-based paint. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it's because of how the contract to buy and sell is written that it says in there it's void if one has not been executed
Yep.
prior to the contract. But there are some attorneys at the state level that are trying to change that, so it's just a period of time during which it has to be disclosed. Because
Yeah.
people screw it up all the time.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about the first two, your first meeting, and then what happens before you go on showings. The showing stuff, we have an entire class on that. That's looking at houses. We're not covering that tonight. The writing offer thing, again, we have an entire class on that. Making strong offers that get accepted is one of them on there. But there's like an entire 2-hour class on how to strengthen your offer and get it accepted, especially when you're in a multiple offer situation market like we are here. Although it's becoming less so. It's softening a little bit. Instead of getting 9 offers on a property in one day, now we're seeing maybe 2. So it's definitely softening up quite a bit. It also depends on the property. That's true. Okay. So that's the writing offer portion. Then the contract for close. We've got an entire section on contract to close. That's on the class. We've got one already recorded, and there's one coming up, pretty sure. And then closing. What happens at closing? We have an entire class on closing real estate deals. That's covered there. And then post-closing. So in my opinion, your relationship with your real estate broker should not end at the closing. I think that there are things that your real estate broker should do for you after closing. For example, these classes. I think that your real estate broker should be educating you and providing good resources and tools. So one of the things they should do for you, and Tammy and I really need to do a better job at this, but if any client ever needs it, they can call us and we're happy to do it. We just don't do it automatically. But they should be reviewing your real estate portfolio, showing you approximate values of properties, or at least what's sold around there so you get an idea of comparable sales, to keeping you abreast of how your properties are performing. And so we really should do a better job than that. Some real estate brokers do a great job at this. It's actually one of the ways that some real estate brokers get listings, because people realize, oh my gosh, my property's worth that, I want to sell. We're not really trying to encourage our clients to sell properties. We're trying to encourage them to buy and hold. But they will automatically do this every year to show you what your property is worth, which we're happy to do for people. We just don't automatically do it. Referral directory. So on the website and also in the back of this book is an entire referral directory on different people you need for different services. So hard money lenders, garage door openers, lenders, all that stuff. It's all in the back of the book. It's also on the website in case you need it. And then changes in marketing conditions that affect your real estate. So keeping you informed of stats. You know, what's the months of inventory? What's the appreciation rate been doing? What's happening in the rental market? Are rents changing? You know, we can actually pull rent comps for you when you're renewing your leases or getting ready to, 90 days before your lease is due, as we teach in property management. If you now need these, we can pull those for you. So all those things after closing, I think, are things that your real estate broker should be doing. Your real estate broker, in my opinion, should start providing you leases and related paperwork. So we started doing this for our clients. It took me a long time to finally do it, but we finally had an attorney draft up the lease. It's the lease we teach from this class, and we provide that to clients, and also the option, if you're doing lease options, we provide that now too. And then classes, we talked about what those are, and then answers to your real estate questions. If you have a question about real estate, you should call your real estate broker. You should just get answers to your questions. And you probably can get a free burrito out of it in most cases. And that's it. Any questions? I was flying through that thing tonight. Any final questions on the buying process overview? Really what this class was is there are videos for every different section that we didn't cover tonight. That's the short synopsis of it. But we did cover a ton of stuff about the first part, right? But then there's a whole bunch of other steps in there that we're like, hey, listen, I can't do this justice trying to teach it in 15 minutes thrown in here, so there's 2 hours on it later. That's basically it. Any questions? On anything? On anything?
It doesn't have to be about class, right? I mean, it's 7:20. We got time.
Oh, we're going to teach like a little mini class? All right, cool. So Brian's going to answer any real estate question you have. Oh, this is, Brian.
I'm sorry. Was that this year or last year?
That was last year, actually.
I could have solved all of your problems last year. This year was only real estate problems.
Yeah.
What's next year gonna be?
You have to wait to find out.
Yeah.
Depends on whether I win the Teacher of the Year award or not.
You were nominated.
I think you're in the running.
You were nominated last year.
Top runner.
Yeah. You're the top. He's the top runner?
I think he is the top runner. He's front runner.
I don't know.
He's looking all intellectual.
I am. I was going for it.
I'm not going to do glasses now.
Coming in a polo next week too. I'm not gonna wear a road shirt. It's gonna be like a dress shirt and like a sport coat.
You tend to dress up in the winter. Like in the summer, you totally slob it down. Yeah. But then he wears like pants and like shoes. Like in the summer, you're wearing like sneakers. Yeah. So any questions? Anyone having any particular challenges or need help with anything in the marketplace? No questions. All right. Well, if you have no questions, stick around for the class after the class. You can network with people. Thank you for all coming, and I do appreciate it. We will see you next week.